Hello, everyone. Welcome to SPE Live on AI in Energy. My name is Miada Ramadani, and I will be your host on today's SPE Live. This broadcast is made possible by sponsorship from the SPE Foundation. Technologies and environments are swiftly evolving. Today, we highlight a key area of that digital transformation, the rapid creation and implementation of AI, artificial intelligence. The oil and gas industry among those which may stand to benefit the most from its application. However, while artificial intelligence optimizes business operations, productivity, and safety, several companies are stumbling trying to leverage its value. So, to provide further insight, SPE brought together an expert panel of leaders who contributed to the evolution and deployment of AI technologies. During this session, our guests will be presenting their own personal views that are not reflections of any organization that are associated with. So without any more delay, my guests are Patrick Bangert, Vice President of AI for Samsung SDSA, and Raif Aseeri, Digital Transformation Director and Saudi Arabia Country Leader at Baker Hughes C3.ai, Angela Elliott Mathis, CEO and founder of ThinkTank Mathis Limited. And last but not least, Saeed Al-Mubarak, petroleum engineering consultant at Saudi Aramco and chairperson of SPE's Digital Energy Technical Section. Welcome, everyone. I would like to also, in the beginning, ask the participants to engage in our conversation. This is your opportunity to ask the experts a question and voice your opinion about artificial intelligence. So let's set the stage for this discussion today, and starting with the fundamental definition of what is artificial intelligence. I like the speaker. I'm expecting a lot of responses here. Patrick, why don't we begin with you, and let's see what also everyone participates and contributes to this.
Yeah, hello, good morning. Thank you for having me on the panel. Artificial intelligence is really an umbrella term. It encompasses many things that can be quite distinct from each other. You might have heard of other terms: deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence, neural networks. Many of these terms mean almost the same thing or are used as more or less synonyms of each other. So really, artificial intelligence combines many, many methods, and all of their aim is to produce what we call a model. A model is really an equation, a mathematical equation that says what you want to know is a function of several things that you can know in other means, by measurement, by observation. And in that equation, the machine learning algorithm, that's the other famous term, algorithm, produces a number of parameters, so multiplicative constants in that equation. And that's really all there is to it. So machine learning, artificial intelligence is a system of many methods that produces models like this. Models can then do anything from forecasting things, tomorrow this will be such and such, classifying things. This piece of data is an example of type A versus type B. It can produce new data from old data, so you can substitute, for example, a physical measurement with a calculation in soft sensing. You can use the model to calculate what actions you should take in order to circumvent some situation that you don't want or to bring about a situation that you do want. So models can take many, many different forms, and artificial intelligence encompasses all of this.
Yes. Angela, do you want to add to this? What is your definition to artificial intelligence?
I think everything. Hello, everyone from Edinburgh here. Good morning, good afternoon. I think what Patrick has said is a great generic part of that, and I think it's great to point out that all of these are, they're mathematical methods. They're based on maths and the way you would treat data. I think the word model is, although it's not something we use, but it's a convenient method. It's a, you need language to describe this. So it is about models, and it depends if your model is good enough. If how statistical can you get away with? Can you get away with Bayesian? Can you get away with Gaussian? It depends what you want to do with it. How sophisticated and how non-standard your mathematics will be. And I think that's what's important as well. That's just an additional piece. You can go beyond AI, for example, and use your data to really get close to reality and find the sensitivities in the data as well. Yeah.
Right. And Saeed, let's have your point of view about the definition of AI.
Hello, everyone. Well, artificial intelligence is not about intelligence at all, as there isn't any form of intelligence that is really artificial. So what I would define AI is more of a mathematical, computerized echo of domain experts' knowledge. Whatever the knowledge is, and it's the availability of enough data about repetitive phenomena, behavior, performance, or even operational incidences to provide means to scale experts' capabilities and let computers do the job. It's just to free us from doing the time-consuming work. That's more of a definition for a general one, and that's it.
Right. And Raif, Aseeri, what's your definition of AI?
So if I were to define AI in 2 words, I'd say it's pattern recognition, a very sophisticated form of pattern recognition, if you will. But aside from the technical or philosophical definitions, I'd like to shine some light on the historical context of the AI evolution, because I think it's going to be relevant if we're going to talk about what AI is. If we look at the term artificial intelligence, it was first coined in the mid-1950s by John McCarthy at Dartmouth College. Even if you look at machine learning, for example, it was coined in 1959 by Arthur Samuel. The question here is, how come it took more than 50 years for AI to become relevant and prevalent in the way we see it today in the industry? Well, it turned out that the answer lies in the birth and maturity of 3 other technologies that helped unlock the potential of AI. Internet of Things, which was coined in 1999, and it enabled the sensorization of the industry and the generation of massive amounts of data across critical assets and machines. Big data, which was coined in 2005, and it enabled us to consume and utilize all the available data at hand. And cloud computing, which was first introduced in its modern context in 2006, even though network-based computing existed since the 60s. And it enabled us to be able to run sophisticated computations extremely economically. And only then were we able to develop and run sophisticated AI algorithms at scale with tangible impact. And it's really at the confluence of those 4 technologies where we see digital transformation manifests itself today in the industry.
Right. And speaking from an operational standpoint, how is artificial intelligence being implemented in the oil and gas? Start with Raif.
Oh, certainly. I guess that's an important question, and I guess we can address it at both the macro and micro levels. From a macro level, at an organization, from an organizational standpoint, effective AI implementation really starts at the top of the organization with sponsorship from the C-suite. And we usually see this followed by the appointment of the chief digital officer, or what I like to call the chief technology enabler. From there, there are 4 steps that need to be taken in order to ensure enterprise-wide implementation of AI. Define and gain quick wins to demonstrate the value and gain endorsement. In parallel, devise digital transformation and AI roadmap in alignment with stakeholders. Pick your technical partners carefully and strategically, and implement a robust change management strategy to ensure adoption. And if we look at the micro level from a use case or a problem statement standpoint, there are usually 5 questions that we must ask ourselves prior to implementation. And those are: is the value proposition clearly defined and aligned? Is the problem statement addressable by AI? Is the data available? Are the people available, whether technical or business resources? And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, is there an economic value to be gained out of this implementation? And if the answer is yes to all those questions, then technical execution and application specification can commence.
Great. What are others? Do you want to add, Saeed? I see that you want to add something.
Raif mentioned basically all the ingredients for a successful implementation of almost any technology. It fits AI, it fits any component of digital transformation. And thank you, Raif. I mean, it's really clear. You mentioned the components with the C class, and you mentioned the ingredients that are needed basically to implementation. One of the most important one, it has to be, any application must have a clear value proposition, and that's stated by Raif. Now let me go to the application that might be, very appropriate to the implementation of AI in a company and the operation side. Definitely asset surveillance, facility inspection, maintenance, and prediction and optimization endeavors of rotating equipment or of technologies that have more of repetitive, performance. But there are other things that are not related even to the operational side, and we can use AI to create some sort of a virtual consultant capitalizing in the most common application areas of AI, including natural language generation, speech recognition, and computer vision. And this consultant shall be approachable at any time, from anywhere, and provide feedback about almost every aspect of business, be it operational, non-operational. Just like Watson, if you've seen Watson and Jeopardy and these things. Now, if we go back to the operational side, we have to be clear that the requirements are really, there are many requirements in the operational environment, particularly in the energy sector. And all infrastructure would have to be revisited, and special investment has to be there, using the knowledge that Raif has mentioned of technologies, of change management, and also the investment and the vision that the company has for the implementation of digital transformation or AI. So there has to be a practical experience embedded within basically the plan itself. And decision makers have to be clear on other requirements, and they need to furnish it basically to make sure that the projects are given higher chances of success.
Right, absolutely.
And if I may jump in and just add one more point of view, there's a famous term, POC purgatory, which kind of defines the current state of the oil and gas industry's adoption of the technologies. Now, of course, what Raif and Saeed have said is completely correct. However, on the ground, many companies don't actually do that. So it has to be mentioned that for the most part, what happens is that a relatively small and young startup will approach a very old and large oil company and say, hey, we have this new technology, why don't you try it out? Then the oil company says, yes, fantastic, let's try it out. Under try it out or POC, those two companies, however, generally mean very different things. The oil companies are very used to trying out new technologies, but they're typically all physical things. They can literally be plugged in, and if within the next week or two they perform well, great, the POC is done. You can do this with a new pump or a new generator or something like that. Very easy. The young startup that's coming in expects the POC to last a couple of months and knows ahead of time that it needs several people with domain knowledge, that it needs data to be provided, that there are computer interfaces that need to be set up. So there is work involved, substantial amounts on both sides of the cooperation. And if the oil company cannot provide sufficient data or sufficient domain expertise and help, then the POC is doomed to fail. So there is an alignment of expectations that's required in order to be able to do this. And we see it fail oftentimes, largely because of change management, like that was mentioned by Raif, and also because of resources. The oil company expects to be able to, as I said, plug this in. In other words, resources are equal to very close to zero, but that's not realistic. So if you're going to do this, there needs to be clear communication that the amount of resources required are significant, and the oil company needs to be prepared to put those in. They come in time, in human resources, and yes, dare I say it, also in terms of money. That young startup will need to survive. Of course, there are bigger players in the AI field. I represent one of them. But for the most part, AI is still a field of a large number of quite small and young companies, and they're the ones who have the innovative technologies.
Right. Angela, do you have something to add or to answer?
You may be muted, Angela.
Yeah, I am. Sorry, there was some noise outside, but I didn't want to disturb the whole thing. Live broadcast. Yeah, I think everything Aseeri has said is what our experience of 10 or more years is, and we'll deal with it later obviously in this discussion. But it's necessity and leadership are the two. Is it necessity that's going to drive? And I think that's all about the numbers and the. You can do a business plan, you can do what's the outcome, you can do those, but you really need, a driver for this. And I think that's the bit that, the proof of concept proves it. And I think we're still, to be positive, I think this is, it takes time. You have to give time to new capability. And we're in that cycle as a race, as a whole, as humanity is in that cycle at the moment of trying to test where it can be used. So I don't, we shouldn't get panicky. It will happen. I think we're learning a lot, and when we've learned, we'll move.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you are bringing all these points, because they all tie well with our SPE's upcoming symposium on artificial intelligence. Right now, the call for abstracts is open. So maybe if someone watching and has the experience and the knowledge and would like to share it, SPE encourages you to submit your abstract. The link will be there in the comment bar for more information. And now let's go to we have so many questions from the audience. I have here one question to everyone to answer, of course. Where does oil and gas stand compared to other industries in AI implementation?
That's a good one.
If I may, there's a ranking that came out just recently, and there is one industry that ranks lower than oil and gas, and that's governments. Everybody else is higher up the food chain.
Oh my God. Great.
Yeah. But I think, if I may, I think the reason is the oil and gas sector it's about history again. It's 40, 50 years old, and we've got a lot of brownfield sites. And I think we'll get to that in this discussion, is if the way forward is about renewing the oil and gas and looking at it afresh. This is where the AI has its opportunity. So let's not despair. You've got a lot of legacy, you've got a lot of good practiced methodologies. But if you're wanting to, and we've collected lots of data in this industry, masses of it, there's sensors all over the place. So there's good news to be had here. Watch for some more. We're going to have those conversations as we go forward here, right?
Well, with the oil and gas, I think it's more of a fit for purpose technology. It's always this way anyway, but it's not really based in technologies. The operation itself is not a technology-based company. If you look at the latest surveys on basically who made money out of COVID-19 and these things, it will not be companies that are related to the energy sector and disregarding the oil price anyway. But it's more of Amazon, it's more of Netflix, and others that are really based on AI technology, or at least digital aspects of business. There are segments within the energy sector that will capitalize on AI, and I'm sure many companies are venturing into this. Again, the requirement that Raif mentioned and Patrick has mentioned, they're really a true requirement. Maybe the move is slower than what we expect, but it's there in a specific location where they are based on the neat technologies. Definitely when it comes to simulation, rotating equipment, and maintenance, these are the places where basically more of an good targets for AI.
Yeah, I would agree that oil and gas comes a little bit late in the adoption curve, and there are other technologies that preceded oil and gas. For example, utilities is one of the ones that adopted faster, and I think this is due to the sheer number of smart meters that they have. Again, going back to IoT and the data that is generated. Manufacturing, I think, one of the ones that adapted quicker also due to the continuous need for process optimization. More recently, we saw financial services adapting fairly quickly and becoming mature in this field. One of the prime and interesting use cases is fraud detection, how to prevent illegible credit transactions. But I think I share Angela's optimism. I truly think that oil and gas is adopting. I think we've seen a lot of development over the last 1 or 2 years, and I'm hopeful that we'll see a lot more in the years to come.
Right. Let's pivot to discuss the pandemic that has altered many of our lives, and as a result, also how we work. Has COVID-19 been an AI accelerator or roadblock? And how will AI emerge in this new normal? Let's begin with Saeed.
Well, COVID, I mean, you're bringing a subject that are more of a sensitive. I experienced it myself. So it has changed a lot and drastically impacted the energy sector across the globe, and has significantly affected all aspects of our life, including the energy, definitely, sector. The whole range of consequences for the energy sector in particular is yet to be revealed. And really, it's difficult to predict. Because it's the energy sector in particular, it's not really one faucet where basically we have one only entity that controls it. But now let's go, just talk about what has happened because of two things, unfortunately, that happened at the same time. It's COVID-19 and lower oil prices, and biggest dip in world energy demand. Constructions and new facilities, definitely they're delayed or stopped. Planned maintenance are suspended, maybe postponed. Many companies have ceased and decreased capital expenditure, and definitely more layoffs. I mean, it's just like I read an article today, is Schlumberger is more than 20,000 layoffs. So, but there are good things also happened. It's more profit for companies that are based in technology, just like I mentioned, be it Amazon, look at the figures, Netflix and all the other, Zoom, and there are only few companies in the energy sector that accelerated their digital transformation endeavors, including AI capabilities, conducting their business or witnessing even their operation remotely, witnessing technologies like multi-phase flow meters and others remotely. So they haven't really stopped. They capitalized on all the applications to expedite. In a poll that I just ran in LinkedIn, what really drives, or what drivers to change? Well, it looked that fear came to be the strongest driver to change. And unfortunately, this change lasts as the source of fear exists. So if it disappears, I think things will go to normal. And in a reactive industries, any change may be perceived as a temporary anyway. So if we talk about, is it really necessity is the mother of invention? Or do we believe in the only way to predict the future is to invent it? I think the first one, necessity is the mother of invention, is more of a reactive. And in reality, it may it sounds like we don't have vision. So we wait for necessity to change. And the current crisis is not really an academic one. It's a real, and it maybe holds within potential of inception of a great concepts and ideas and opportunities. Definitely, the significance of the opportunity can become greater if all the players, and I have to refer to Patrick when he stated basically any project needs academia, maybe technology providers to team up with operators and devote some sort of business model to implement a vision and facilitate continuous engagement, transparency, care, trust, and give back to the others, basically. And I must say that it is easier said than done. And without the existence of leaders who have power and vision and who believe in this basically endeavor. So the leadership, again, we go back to leadership from all the sectors, academic, technology providers, and operators.
Right, Angela.
I think, agreeing with all of that, but I think COVID, what it has done is, for many sectors, apart from those that are obviously benefited, including lawyers and accountants and everyone who has to deal with all of the legalities of changing the way we actually hire our staff, etc. But one is it will have shown the weaknesses in the operation models. And as I've seen reports of European countries, one of France, for example, where productivity and efficiency, we cannot afford to have the weaknesses, the risks that probably we tolerated in the past. So I think COVID-19, if you like, has shown where those risks are too great. And I think there will be a driver. In fact, the head of our CEO of UK Oil and Gas, Deirdre Mwiki, gave a presentation at the Scottish Energy Forum, and you can go and see that online as well. And she was saying that, the grouping in the UK continental shelf have all agreed that COVID has shown weaknesses in their business model, whether it's maintenance or whether it's just keeping uptime. And I think that those will be the areas where people will think, how do we future-proof this? Because this is not the first or the last pandemic, perhaps, that we're dealing with, or any kind of crisis that comes at us with lightning speed. So I think it will be a driver. I don't think it's a roadblock. It can only be something that is a wake-up call to some of the leaders to rethink some of the things that they're paid to do and the things that they keep their eyes on. And I think it'll bring those to the surface.
If I can jump in, so I think one of the biggest things that's happened is that everybody's worked from home, and senior management has realized that the business is still running. I think a year ago, for most people throughout the world, if they had asked their senior management, "Can I please work from home 5 days a week?" they would have gotten a resounding no. Because first of all, I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. And then, let's face it, you're not going to work at home, right? Those are contradictory terms. But it turns out that yes, very well, actually people work harder. I feel that, at least with us at Samsung, the productivity has actually gone up during COVID times. People work very well in a very concentrated fashion. And so the internet, even though this isn't AI, but the internet enables this remote work. And that has yielded, I believe, a mindset change in a lot of people, especially in senior management levels, to realize that technology-assisted work actually works. It's not this fanciful new thing that the young people want, but it really does deliver. And AI is not necessarily part of working from home, because largely it's things like Zoom and WebEx and things like that. But it's the mindset change that lets people realize that some of these new computer-enabled technologies really do work and benefit. And of course, much of it has AI built in, as was said previously, voice recognition, voice output, recommender systems. If I go to Netflix or to Amazon or to websites like this, I get recommendations. And let's face it, we all take those recommendations. Those AI systems work. And so there is a new normal to work at any company, whether it's an oil and gas company or a different company. All of these future of work technologies, they're out there, they're AI enabled, and they help us do our job better. Now, specifically to the oil and gas industry, there's AI too. And I think this mindset change will enable senior management to take AI much more seriously in an operational context. And therefore, I believe it's definitely an enabler.
If I may, I believe the COVID situation has definitely shown us the impact of technology in our industry. If we pause for a second and think about what COVID did, it disrupted the economy, it increased market volatility, and it prevented us, like we discussed, from physically being at work sites. So how has technology helped? Well, outside the sphere of AI first, if we take Baker Hughes, for example, we see our drilling services teams executing jobs remotely, like Mubarak, like Saeed mentioned, through our remote operations units. We see our Avitas team conducting facility inspections using drones. We see our additive manufacturing teams printing more parts than ever before, enabling clients to avoid complex and long lead supply chain processes. But even if we zoom into the realm of AI, and specifically at what we do at Baker Hughes C3, if we put ourselves in the shoes of an oil chief executive, during this time, we'd want to ensure that we're still operating and that we continue generating revenues. And this means that we need to ensure that our production is optimized and that we're forecasting the market demand accurately. And those are two prime use cases for AI, production optimization and demand forecasting. We'd also want to ensure that our facilities and subsystems are reliable and that we're predicting critical equipment failure to avoid unplanned downtime. Yet another two examples, reliability and predictive maintenance. We'd probably also want to ensure high cash availability at hand. And one of the main ways to do that is through reduction and optimization of our inventory in our balance sheets. Yet another example of how AI can help. And truly the examples are plentiful. So I genuinely believe that technology is going to play a major role in our industry, and AI in particular will be at the forefront of that. And COVID had helped us realize this more than ever before.
Right, absolutely. I would like to thank our audience. They are sending a lot of questions, and I have here a good question. What are common hesitations in adopting new technologies like AI in oil and gas? If anyone would like to answer this. The common hesitations.
Well, we're all hesitating, so I'll try. One of the hesitations that I see out there in the industry is belief. I think that's the first big step. A lot of people believe that AI doesn't work, and it's not quite a sort of religious belief, but it's very difficult to overcome. And it's particularly hard because AI is typically not a plug-and-play technology. You can't, implement it in a day or two. It needs new data. Then the AI needs training, and then it can be adopted. So one of those things that you see is that when the AI company says, "Okay, we'll go away for a month or two to train the networks and then come back and demonstrate," then people get very flustered because they expect this to be a push-button technology, and AI is not. Training models takes a macroscopic amount of time. So this is one of those things where people lack the belief that these technologies will work. Because they are perceived as tricky, they are perceived as brittle, that work only in certain circumstances. They are robust technologies, but they do require customization to the individual use case, and therefore they require time and resources. But they also need to be given the opportunity to develop to the use case and then meet the need. And they can. If they're given the resources, they can. So one of the stumbling blocks is belief. The other stumbling blocks is 90% of the time in the oil and gas industry, these projects fail. That's huge. But why do they fail? Raif said this earlier. It fails because of change management. The poor AI, let's have some compassion for it, is not at fault, right? It's not the algorithm's fault or the neural network's fault. Those things are fine. It's always a people problem, right? When things don't get adopted. And the people problem here is change management. If somebody delivers this fantastic new technology, let's say predictive maintenance, you might have to have a 2,000 people maintenance organization change their way of life from a proactive firefighter to now a preemptive planning-based organization that executes things according to schedule. They don't want to. And getting them to do that is a lengthy process that has nothing to do with AI, but it is absolutely critical for the AI to do its job.
I totally second what you mentioned, Patrick. And if I may add, one of the other roadblocks that we witness in the industry is the lack of strategic vision of how the industry and the company is continuously going to evolve and improve. And generally speaking, at least from my observations in the oil and gas industry, I see the vast majority of people, their vision extends to the current quarter. And we tend to, and we are programmed to think quarter to quarter. But in any organization, there has to be some specific teams that think differently from the vast majority and think about where the company would be in 10 years, 20 years from today. And if we do not have those resources in our organization, we will see what we're seeing today in terms of either hesitation or the industry being late in the adoption curve.
If I may add, we're more of engineers, mostly. We're not mathematicians, and basically the field, this is why most of the engineers operate in the field. They believe in physics. And when it comes to basically all the operations, all the rotating equipment and other things, they can be modeled and have their physics-based models. That basically, I would go to a belief, just like Patrick said. I mean, if there is a model and that I really trust, I've been working and I really understand, and it's not a black box, no algorithms, no weighting, no bias, and I have all the data that's required to build that model. Why would I go to a model that I know a little about, maybe I'm not expert in, and I don't have even the resources? I mean, I'm talking about competencies here. Data is available. Then it goes to the data with confidentiality and other issues that are related to sharing data or not, what kind of data. So data management is, again, is an issue. But maybe because we are mostly engineers and we believe in physics. And that's more of a stumbling block to any engineer. Why would I go? I mean, and technology has to be a fit for purpose. I don't really say for the technology just for the sake of it. They're everywhere. I mean, I'm doing business. My business is running. I wouldn't go to the extreme. If it's not broken, don't fix it. But it's been working. Not only 50 years, 100 for 100 years, it's been working using physics-based models. So what are you bringing? Just adds a value to management, and it has to be demonstrated. Now it's a challenge. Most of the pilots, early pilots, maybe 80% failed. I mean, it's regardless of what the story is, and the details are not really known about these failures and why they happen. It's because of one reason or another. Usually it's not technology, by the way, because it's more of a tool. So it could be competencies, it could be change management, it could be availability of accurate data. And this is why most of the projects, other than with the technology companies, fail, more than 80%. So I would go to something that grants me more of a chance of success and cost me less. I'm talking about money here. I mean, it's not really, it's going to cost me time, money, and efforts to invest to see value. We would go to Raif. There has to be some visionaries, and hopefully they're leaders who are really visionaries to formulate some sort of a vision where we are going in the future. They don't have to be pragmatic, and they don't have to be pessimistic. And for visionaries, once they establish these visions, It's okay to go with an R&D project and fail. Failure is allowed. Can we change that mindset? Failure is allowed in new implementation of new technologies. And this is how the industry will learn. Another thing, within the technology itself domain, it's an ecosystem. It's not only operators that are there in the market. It's technology providers and academia. Again, I'm repeating myself here. But they have to create some sort of a business model to create some sort of, the greatest value that they can attain from it. There has to be some serious collaboration between those entities. And definitely the benefit that will be generated will be the benefits of all.
Right.
If I can just one last little point. I mean, it's go back to what we were saying, necessity versus sort of vision and leadership. Actually, what we're saying, what you just said, Saeed, and what we, underlying this is a necessity. I mean, if engineers, if an AI system is not because the physics models are what it's based on, then maybe we're needing to look for those areas, and I think that will lead on to the next area. But it's we're going to be looking for the areas where the current physics models are inadequate; they're too approximate, and because we're there's the complexity, the industry's maturing, then we're going to have to. This is a fantastic opportunity to say, can we revisit the physics models? Stop doing. We've got a multi-physics model. We've got a set of rule sets that we use. And conveniently chop this into multi-physics, which is dumbing down what the actual problem is. And because we've got data, it's eminently, the problem and the dynamics, the nonlinearity, the complexity is in that data. And I think I really believe that's where this is going to have its day. And we see that actually in the aerospace industry, if I can give one example, because we work with space, launchers and people looking to track satellites and avoid collision with debris and those kinds of things. And if you just take the one example, I've been in conversations over this COVID-19. It's like a parallel world. I've been talking to people who are talking about a spacecraft or an aircraft going into lower or suborbital, taking off from somewhere in Scotland and landing in Japan in 2 hours. You can't do that with the current physics models. Now, you might say, well, what's that got to do with oil and gas? Well, actually, in oil and gas, how much more, if we can only get 30 to 40% of the oil and gas out with the current models, and we want to, we want it efficiently and, really efficiently and use AI, maths and data to get that, maybe up to 50%, then the secret will lie in using and revisiting the physics models and bringing along those engineers with them, giving them new rules of thumb to do it. I think that's, for us, that's the one we're watching and seeing. But I think there's a maturity has to take place to do that.
Right.
Guys,
Thank you.
That's open to discussion.
Thank you for answering. Yes, absolutely. I see.
Well,
so another
just one thing.
Sure.
Well, we study theories in universities. So in the academic life and science fiction, it's okay to talk about these things, fine. But in business, it's a bit different. It's cost. So definitely, it has to be associated with some sort of a strategy that has its own budget. And if not, then we can study this in school. We can talk about it in conferences. But to make it real, you have to have money. I mean, it's a cost.
Right. Okay.
Somebody has to spend.
Definitely. Okay. Another key driver to change occurring around the world right now is the energy transition. How does AI support that, both now and moving forward? And Angela?
Yes. Yeah. So that's a beautiful follow into what Saeed just said and what we just talked about.
Yes, yes.
Where is the economic driver for this, right? So why would we transition? We're great, thanks. We're pumping out that oil, and there's still so much more of it there, right? But brownfield sites, many countries have a lot of brownfield sites. The efficiencies that are within those have to be relooked at. The health and safety, the environment issue. If you want to start talking about the sort of energy transition. You know, we're not experts in energy transition. Again, I would recommend go look at some of the things that the Scottish Energy Forum has, some brilliant speakers there. You know, oil, you know, and I think rather than we get, oil is going to be replaced within, I don't know, we just get rid of it and we'll do something else. It's not, it's got its place, but it has to find its place. And we wouldn't have enough energy, in fact, for the demands of humanity if we just abandoned sort of the whole oil and gas sector at this point in time. That's unrealistic. But within there, I think that's where the drivers come, because we are looking at how do you use AI, therefore, and that's what I think doing, the good news is that to deal with this, we need a new scientific quest, but it's not science for science sake. It's, it's actually starting from a TRL 1 and getting it to TRL 9. I mean, our company does that all the time. And if you look at some of the rocket launching companies, they knew that to reinvent that industry with a window of what are we in 2024, what are we in 2025, that's a very short window. Then the answer is to re-engineer engineering processes. That's a term that I think we're going to hear a hell of a lot more of, going forward. And to do that, you do have to revisit the way we use data and the physics models that we develop going forward. And by that, I mean really reinventing the physics models. If you look at the physics models we've got now, they're generally, they're kind of good enough. They weren't tailor-made for many of the problems we've got. They were convenient approximations. I will tell you from experience, that there are orders of magnitude of efficiency and accuracy to work with the real world, to get closer to the real world, to make those models those physics models, and therefore the engineering tools much more specific. We can have a conversation about that. It's a whole dialogue, but that's what areas who are having to reinvent themselves to stay in the business. And I think the energy transition is going to be a driver. There's going to be a fire on the feet of the oil and gas sector. And this is one where there's stuff to do. We can get more oil out of the brown field, and we can do the new fields with perhaps a new perspective.
Right.
So would like to add with that new perspective, I think we first of all have to say climate change is real, and it's caused by humans. We all know that, hopefully. So what are we going to do about it? AI can help a great deal with this, right? So you have technologies from predictive maintenance that will help you, deal with releasing a little bit less while continuing to do the same thing that you're doing today. There are AI technologies that will help you transition to new kinds of energy. Clearly, there is a huge transition going on towards electrification. So if we just think broadly, oil and gas delivers really two things. It delivers mobility and electricity, right? So mobility is increasingly being taken over by electricity. We're electrifying cars right now. Electrification of ships and planes and trucks and so on is in progress and will come in the foreseeable future. So there will be less and less need for oil and gas in the sense of fueling mobility. And on the electricity side, of course, we've recently seen that coal has taken a huge step back in favor of gas to supply electricity to the world. However, renewable sources of energy like solar and wind and water and so on are on the rise, and they should be, because we need them to combat climate change. One of the principal technologies that's missing really is the battery. And we see AI work very, very well in recent years in material science, where AI is helping to develop new materials, new physical technologies that will help us go forward. We all know the lithium-ion battery is dead, that it cannot be produced at scale, it cannot be recycled at scale, it doesn't work for long enough. We need new battery technologies that can buffer the renewables in the grid. All of these things can be provided by AI and supported by AI. And the energy companies that are currently primarily focused on oil and gas will need to transition away from that to the other world. Of course, on the financial markets, we're seeing the same thing. divestment is a big thing these days. Major funds have decided to no longer invest at all in the oil and gas sector. And so we are seeing that money talks the talk for the industry and will cause that transition. And I think within the foreseeable future, several probably very major oil companies will either disappear entirely, or they will have to change their major business model to a new one. And AI can help them do that. All the oil companies that will more or less ignore AI as an enabling technology, I think, are the ones at risk.
If I may add to the discussion, I believe that there are some really exciting developments happening with CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And the more these technologies develop, the more data they're going to generate, and the more applicability AI will have in this space. And another area where AI is playing a role today is sustainability when it comes to carbon footprint, energy consumption, portfolio management, etc. And we saw already some applications that are related to monitoring, but quite frankly, if we were to be in a position to extract the most value, we'd need to start playing into optimization.
Well, the way I see it, visions and policy represent the main uncertainty as to whether AI will speed up or slow down the energy transition. I mean, just for an normal layman observer realizes that cheaper energy always leads customers to use it less efficiently and less attractive to even use more efficient system to save energy. If policymakers adopted the green agenda, then basically AI capabilities can have a role in the function that we have earlier covered, including the ones that Patrick has mentioned, and even Raif, optimization of different resources now, because it's basically oil, gas, coal, and the alternative energy, even in surveillance, inspection, automation, informed and predictive, and maintenance as well. Fundamentals will never change, yet technologies such as AI will be one of the enablers that business basically managers could tap on in their capabilities when it fits. So basically when it fits, they'll use it. But visions and policy, they're the main drivers for the energy transition.
Absolutely. Vision and policy. We have the last topic here. Many business leaders are buying into the promise of AI. Do we efficiently scale? Is it possible to fully scale given the variation in the work processes? This question for everyone. Let's start with the Raif, maybe.
Sure, I can take a stab at that. And I leave the technology aspects to the other panelists, but what I'll focus on, which I think is critical here, is the mindset and the desire of business leaders today. And one of the things that I do when I deal with different clients is I try to map them on where they lie in the adoption curve, because the conversation and the discussion differs greatly based on that. If you look at the early market, which contains the innovators and the early adopters, those companies are already running. You only need to point them to where to invest and help them develop the roadmaps, and they're good to go. Then comes early majority. And with those people, you need to work a little bit more. Essentially, you need to demonstrate the value first, then they will take the lead. Then comes the late majority. And generally speaking, those organizations tend to be risk averse and their decision-making abilities are very slow. So here, value demonstration on its own is not sufficient. They actually have to wait and see what happens with others first. So if you do want to win them, you'll have to showcase examples and success stories of how this worked with other clients. And then lastly comes the skeptics or the laggards. And frankly speaking, if organizations who are skeptics remain to be skeptics, more likely than not, they will cease to exist in the future. And I'd hate to end on what it seems a pessimistic note, but I think this is a demonstrated fact. If we take a look at the Fortune 500 companies, Since the year 2000, more than 52% of the companies in the Fortune 500 have been acquired, gone bankrupt, or simply ceased to exist. And in this day and age, in the age of digital disruption, I believe that digital transformation and technology adoption are going to be major contributing factors on who remains resilient in the next decade, which I believe ties in nicely with the topic of this discussion. And if I were to summarize my message out of it, it's going to be disrupt or get disrupted.
Interesting views, yes.
Yeah.
Well, to me, when companies seek technologies, definitely it will not be for the sake of technology. It's for the potential value it will bring. AI is not different. Just a few tips very quickly on the applying of any technology. It has to be fit for purpose. There is no one size that fits all. We have to understand their capabilities and limitation. And we have to have full alignment between a short and long term for both vendors and client. When piloting a promising technology, there should be a clear vision on what the future application of it. The pilot is only done to test and qualify the technology and making sure that it works. Once the technology is proven, then the best approach is basically have a big vision, start small, but expand big. I mean, quickly. R&D is a bit different, just like we said. We're allowed to fail when it comes to research and development.
So to the question, can AI scale? Yes, it can. It requires some resources. It requires that vision that Saeed was talking about and some policies within the company. I think the companies that we interact with on a daily basis, maybe watching movies on Netflix or buying things on Amazon, demonstrate that you can deploy and scale AI models worldwide to billions of consumers easily. So it can happen in the oil and gas industry as well. There are additional technologies that will allow you to, having trained a model on one type of equipment, to transport it to the fleet. If you have many of those, it's called an ontology. So there are AI systems that help other AI systems deploy at scale. But simply speaking, the answer is yes. If you want it to scale, if you have the time, the people, and some cash money to do the scaling, it can.
And this is where you will get value. In fact, it's not from the pilot. It's from the scale-up of the project itself.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think if you're going to sum up as well, I think it is, dare to lead in this, because, we were just talking about the leaders, the followers, and the laggards. And I can't help looking at Saeed's his backdrop there, the book that he's written. And I think one of the advice he gives, if you ever meet someone who's a skeptic, run the other direction and have nothing to do with them. And I think Raif just said why, is because they are destined to fail. So I think the winners in this sector will, there will be drivers. We talked about energy transition, and I think that is the place that, that is the preoccupation of this entire industry. And there will be, the engineering world. There are brilliant engineers, and they want to learn. They want to, even if they're mature years in their life, they want to be part of something which is not just legacy. It's fit for purpose for the 21st century. The challenges we're having in the 21st century are going to be there. And the technology, yes, AI will. You do have to train it a little bit in the other, or train it in the new context, but that is doable. And if the rewards are big enough, why would you not? Why would people in the aerospace industry be looking at re-engineering their entire processes of how they design an aircraft? Well, because we need faster, cheaper transport, and the vision is there, whether it came from a sci-fi movie, but just look what SpaceX did, and look at the sort of, the programs that other people have done. Well, we've all been locked up. I mean, how many of us spent many hours watching that amazing SpaceX prowess? That didn't come from using a lot of existing models and factions, and that came from using data and using AI to get there. And I think this industry has a lot of smart people who can open their minds and embrace this just the same as those other sectors do.
Absolutely. Let's get more audience questions, but first, something else for the audience. I wanted to let you know that SPE is currently accepting abstracts for the upcoming SPE Symposium on Artificial Intelligence toward the resilient and efficient energy industry. The symposium is taking place in Saudi Arabia in January next year, but and there are 5 key topics with many categories you can choose from. If you are watching this and you have valuable insights to share, please follow the link in the comments and you can submit your abstracts. The deadline is 15th of August. Saeed, you are on the committee and the chairperson of the Digital Energy Technical Section. Any further comments about what you are looking for in abstract?
Well, first, the symposium will be entertaining, educational, and exploratory. I mean, and you will like it if you attend. I promise. The symposium and what we're looking for in the abstracts, it's more of discussion the enablers of AI technologies, workflow, change management, and people. And they're the subject basically we discussed today and more. The symposium will create a platform to discuss the various capabilities and potential application of AI, be it futuristic or actual. And discussions will be what we have today, where we will be in a decade from now. Besides the technical contents, and this is in every event, it will be a venue where professionals can network, exchange success stories, and maybe failure stories because they can't be shared in international publication, and the challenges through practical case studies. So anyone who basically, I encourage everyone who has an idea to share, just submit an abstract in the link below.
Great. Thank you. I have one more question from the audience, if we have time enough. Just 2 minutes to answer. Has data science been overhyped in the industry? And should we start digitizing our work first to remove operational bottlenecks before starting our venture into AI? That's a question from the
I think on the contrary, if anything, I think data science is understated. I think there's a lot of potential. We've been generating and accumulating data for years, and it's about time that we truly make something out of that data and generate insight that will help us in the way we operate, and it will help us improve and optimize and evolve our business models. So if anything, I think we need more data science presence in our operations.
Well, it's just one thing. Data has to be really accurate. So there has to be an effort to make sure that the data that we have is accurate and representing basically, actual things. And there has to be more of real projects and making sure that these data are usable and they don't contain any bias. Just another view. Data is there. Data is important, but it has to be accurate to make sure that the best value of AI, is attained.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But also from the point of view of applications, I saw a couple of questions in the chat about applications. So let's go through some real quick. A physical multi-phase flow meter can be substituted by an AI calculation. Fault detection in pipelines that you do with pigs can be substituted with the image recognition algorithm. You can forecast failures on rotating equipment like pumps and compressors up to a week or 2 weeks ahead of time, and therefore prevent them and repair them early. You can calculate automatically what set points to put on a gas lift well so that you extract more volume. That can be done in real time. You can tune the choke valve setting on trunk lines, on pipelines, in order to overcome slugs that happen and therefore cause problems in the slug catcher and the treatment plant. You can automatically tune the catalyst in a fluid catalytic reactor in the refinery so that you can get a better conversion from crude oil to the gasoline. you can do many, many practical things with data science backed up by artificial intelligence. So this is real. It's not being overhyped.
That's Angela. Do you want to add something? Or?
Yeah, no, I think everyone said it. It's
Right.
the fear of repeating myself, but I think it is not overhyped. As I think Raif said, as everyone has said, there is so much data. That is what being in 2020 is about. We have more data than any generation of humanity. We have digitalized data more than any other generation ever existing. And we have the ability, we can develop the ability using AI, and by that, it's that broad church of AI. We have mathematical capability to identify, to extract structures, to use it for patterns that will help us to predict all of those things. If we don't use it, what else are we going to use in order to deal with the big challenges that are facing humanity? Even COVID. I mean, there are people creating sensors in 30 seconds to detect whether people have COVID from breath, from saliva, from body sweat. These are, this is coming from the use of data, and it's coming from an analysis and medicine as well. There are, all of our science is going to take a leap. I think this industry is on a journey. As I say, it just doesn't look that way. We're very impatient, but I do think we're on a journey to use it, because the data this industry have is humongous. Not all of it is in a good shape. Not all of it is well tagged, and that's where the care needs to take, and that's where the heartache often comes. But those companies that do it well, and investors will invest in those companies if they know that they're doing it well as well. So I think that's going to be an advantage.
Spot on.
It is basically. It has a value, and definitely companies will target AI application and wherever they bring value. Is it a hype? I believe it is, and it will slow down. People will understand it more, and they will get to know where it brings value. I'm maybe taking a different direction here, but now it is a hype. People are talking about data as if it is, data itself has to be cleaned, and to make sure that it's bringing value. Processes have to be understood. Technologies have to be augmented. I mean, it's just like it's a tool. So that it has capabilities and limitations. Where it's applicable, it will bring value. It's just like the examples that Patrick has mentioned, be it even in a multi-phase flow meter arena. I mean, I hope everyone knows what a multi-phase flow meter is, but even in measurement, it brings value, but definitely it will not replace the conventional way of doing business. It's not because it's incapable, it's because this is how business is today, and maybe in the near future. Might change in the long term, but reality is people, if you even bring a multi-phase technology that's compact, inline, they still have doubt that it's equivalent to a conventional way of testing a well. And it's just like we have to be realistic when we bring any technology. It doesn't mean that there will be excellent application for it in the future, but they have to be really defined. I mean, to bring value of it rather than failures, and we get to slow it down instead.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for your great knowledge and insight. 1 hour went very quickly. I hope, and I'm sure the audience have learned a lot and enjoyed this panel as much as I did. Thank you very much, our guests, Patrick, Raif, Angela, and Saeed. Thank you, SPE Foundation, for sponsoring this SPE Live. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you. Stay safe, and see you another time. New SPE Live. Bye.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.